We will introduce ourselves real quick. I am Shelly Shaw, and I am from Region 11, as is Charles too. We are both digital learning coaches. I taught in the classroom for about 17 years, and then I've been in professional development for about maybe almost 7 years now. Some of it was in Keller ISD, and then the rest of it was here at the Service Center. Most of the time when we're back in school, my job entails being out on the campuses, working with teachers in classrooms, and coaching out there. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'll let Charles.
Yeah, so my team was surprised to find out yesterday I was in a K-5 science lab, even though the bulk of my experience has been at the secondary, like middle school, high school level. 11 years teaching government to high school seniors who are very unmotivated. So I had to trick them into learning by doing pedagogical stuff and technology stuff and all that. I also teach online and hybrid at a local community college. So this online blended learning kind of world isn't exactly new to me. And there are certain tips and tricks that work with 25-year-olds that could also work at the secondary level as well. Shelly and I have both been involved with blended learning at the Service Center. We really built this from the ground up, for about 4 years now. Mm-hmm. And we've been involved with the Math Innovation Zone that's coming out of TEA, Raise Your Hand Texas. We're really excited for some of our districts. We've got a few districts that may be getting some nice grants from Raise Your Hand Texas, hopefully on the 30th, April 30th. So in the next week or so, we're gonna find that out. But like I said earlier, maybe a few of you guys hadn't jumped in at the time, but this session kind of came out of a conversation Shelly and I had about it's all well and good to sort of, patch up the dam as it springs leaks during this COVID-19 thing. But what about when we do go back to school? Like, have we started game planning for a return to face-to-face, and what is that going to look like? And we think that blended learning is the perfect vehicle for that. And so this is going to be part blended learning and part conversation about, have you started planning? To what extent have you started planning? And so that's why we named this Planning for the Win. We want to walk into the fall of 2020 with a winning mindset, not a, oh crap, what's going to happen next mindset.
All right. Do you want to do the Nearpod from your computer, or do you want me to do it?
Go ahead and do it.
Okay. So I'm going to jump over to Nearpod, and we're going to have y'all. Let me open my Nearpod over here. All right, so we're going to pop into Nearpod, and if you will join from whatever device you've got there and follow along, we will also give you the link at the end to the presentation if you want that later. So if you will go to join.nearpod.com, or in the app if you're going to do it on a phone or an iPad or something. And our code is FEDLG. All right, so the first thing that we want y'all to do, you should have on your screen where you can answer. Let's brainstorm some good things that we've learned from this coronavirus experience, because I know it's been difficult. I know it's been crazy and changing every day, but there has been, I think, a lot of good that's come out of it. So if y'all will type that in and submit it to us.
This experience has been like that proverbial jumping in the deep end of the pool to learn how to swim. Hopefully glean some good experiences from this.
I love TikToks. Yeah, Andrea, I agree. Teachers trying new things has been a really great thing. It's been forcing us to jump in the deep end.
Yeah, Sarah, love what you said. Connections and relationships are still the base of everything that we do.
I love what Brandon wrote. Online learning has given traditionally shy or quiet students a stronger voice. Yes.
Awesome. I know my son, who's a special ed student, he was born deaf. He's been really flourishing in this environment where he doesn't have to do math just from 9 to 10. He's got the freedom to do it, when he's ready to do it.
Lord, I like what you said. The classroom instruction will not be the same going forward. Definitely.
True
And
that.
that's really kind of where we wanted to jump off today, is thinking about, how is this going to change learning as we go forward, and how do we need to adapt to that? Yay, Laura, our littles can manage an LMS. I love that.
That's huge.
We hear that so many times. They're too little to do this. No, they're not. I love this one too, Eric. Parents and students are interacting more. This is what a great way to get parents involved in school, right? Now they've become the stand-in teacher.
And I've always been a huge advocate. The vast majority of teachers are doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it. So having that transparency now, I think, is great PR for parents to see what it is that we do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. These are awesome answers.
Learning can continue at home, Tara, which is beautiful for blended learning.
Yes. Oh, I like this one, what Amanda wrote. I've learned to slow down. Me too. Think it was good for all of us to slow down a little bit. Teachers stepping out of their comfort zones.
Giving video feedback is incredible. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to jump to the next slide, but these are awesome and amazing things to celebrate. All right, next we want to think about this, and this is kind of going to get into that part of what is school going to look like, and what do we have to think about as we go into next year. So now that we've gone through the big pause, I like Charles' way of putting the big pause there. What are some challenges you anticipate for the beginning of the year in August?
For high schools, I mean, especially your bigger high schools, do you still bring in all 2,000 students at the same time, or are we going to have to switch it up?
Esther, that's going to be, getting to really know the students. Yeah. And especially if, like what Charles said, if we have to be on some sort of a different schedule and you don't get to see them in person as much, that's going to be harder, but important. Yeah. Will all the students return?
If you're looking at what Georgia and Texas and Oklahoma are doing and what kind of has been pushed out from the federal level, there's sort of a staggered approach to rolling back into normal. And I wonder if districts are going to take that same approach, like a staggered approach to bringing everybody back, as opposed to just opening the doors in August. Students gaps. Yeah, Van said student gaps in learning and how personalized learning will play a role. Definitely, we're going to have to do something to figure out where those gaps are.
Hey, I'm going to jump in real quick. We've had several that have just joined us. We are in Nearpod, so if you want to go to join.nearpod.com, and the code is up here in the right corner, FEDLG, and you can join us in our interactive presentation. I was reading an article yesterday from Edutopia, and it was mostly talking about different superintendents from around the country speculating, what kind of issues they're trying to solve about going back to school. But it was talking about, if we have to have social distancing in school, how are we going to handle that? So I think blended, and they mentioned blended learning several times in there. So I think blended learning is going to play a big role in the fall. Yeah, Lindy, well, my students have covered all their TEKS from the previous year. That's going to be a big one. And I saw somebody else up here talked about gaps in their learning. Kids that did nothing during e-learning.
And then for you administrators, no STAR test, no data. And then what about the STAR test next year? What's that going to look like? And how do we prep our kids for that test? It'd be nice if they just disappeared.
Right. So I think y'all have, really hit the nail on the head of really thinking about all these different problems. Like, are we even going to be able to go back to school? How's it going to look? And then also thinking about all these gaps in learning. All right. So kind of just think, we've already kind of talked about why blended learning. I think that our world is going to be different when we come back. So we've got to think about different ways to deliver education. How many of y'all, if you want to do some thumbs up, are pretty familiar with blended learning? You'll just give a thumbs up if you're pretty familiar with it. Okay, thanks, y'all. So we're going to do like a quick overview of, or actually, I'll let Charles start with his potholes before we go to our quick overview of blended.
Oh yeah, potholes.
I forgot that was there.
So you're driving along, paying attention to your songs, thinking about heading to work or school or wherever you're going, and then all of a sudden you hit this pothole that really jars you and kind of freaks you out. How many of you in the chat box, if you wouldn't mind throwing it in there, how many of you have hit a pretty hard pothole? Because those things are in the ground, they're really hard to see sometimes, especially if there's traffic. And they're not going to break your car. Your car's not going to explode, but it's a jarring experience that kind of wakes you up. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, are there more potholes? Is there more danger in front of me? And so we can think of, right, Naya, I've had my car out of alignment because of one single pothole. Now think about your students who are sitting at home doing the work that's being assigned to them, and let's not even assume negativity here. Let's assume positivity. They're doing everything on your choice boards. They're doing all of your assignments, turning them in on time. Then we're going to slide into summer. Next year is going to start up. How many gaps in their learning are there going to be where those gaps, the students are going to be coming along in a math class or social studies class or a science class, and they're going to hit that educational pothole where it's like, whoa, what do you mean I'm supposed to know blank, blank, blank? I have no idea what this is. And if that pothole is jarring for them, what about you as teachers? You're going to have 30 kids in that class, or you're going to have 150 kids total. And all of a sudden you start to see 10, 15, 20, hopefully not anything over that, but you could have 20 different potholes being hit at the same time in your classes. And we have to really start thinking about these gaps. The students, even the students who are they're trying their best, the parents are trying their best, they come to you next year, they're likely going to have their gaps in understanding.
You want me to play the video now?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Not like maybe the first minute and a half.
Oh, hold on.
Let's skip the video.
Okay, I was going to say I have to go back to the other one to play it, but.
So we're going to jump into this video that's going to give you a super quick overview of what blended learning is. And Shelly and I think that there's a little bit missing from this video as well. But keep your mind in that analogy of potholes. If you're going to do a one-size-fit-all, I'm going to be at the front of the class and I'm going to talk to you, you don't see those potholes until you hit them. And what blended learning allows you to do is to assess students, figure out where those potholes are, and then hopefully fill them in before the students run into those.
Okay, so let me play it. Hopefully sound will work right. Can y'all hear it? Yes, okay.
Where Learning Clicks presents What's Up with Blended Learning. Blended learning is an instructional method that integrates the traditional classroom with innovative technology. But it's more than just technology-rich instruction. According to the Clayton Christensen Institute for Disruptive Innovation, blended learning is defined as a formal education program with 3 key attributes.
Okay.
1. Students learn, at least in part, through online learning, with some element of control over the time, place, path, and/or pace of their education. 2. Students are, at least in part, supervised in a brick-and-mortar location away from home. And 3. The modalities along each student's learning path within a course or subject are connected to provide an integrated learning experience. In other words, blended learning is an instructional method that enables teachers to provide students with a more personalized learning experience. It leverages technology and the internet as a way to enhance learning and promote understanding, while also putting students in the driver's seat when it comes to their education.
So as y'all notice in the video, these were the 4 main things that it talked about. Pace, place, path, and time, and offering flexibility in that. So that's kind of one of the big guiding factors in blended learning is, part of it has to be online, part of it has to be face-to-face in a brick and mortar location. It doesn't say part of it has to be at home, but part does need to be face-to-face. And then these other 4 things, it needs to have some flexibility in pace, place, path, or time. So right now, we're not really in a blended learning situation. We're in a, totally online learning situation. But as we look at transitioning back to school, this is where we're looking at, going into this blended situation would really, really be a good way to transition back.
Potholes again.
Yeah, potholes. Before we think about the question, well, it's leading to the question.
Oh, we can skip it. I think one of these was the video that we were going to play.
Okay. All right. So how does blended learning empower students to fill their own gaps? So thinking about those things we said, pace, place, path, and time, and then also thinking about, partly face-to-face, and my brain just went blank to the third one. Fill me in, Charles.
I was addressing somebody's question.
Okay.
We have flexibility in place, pace, path, and time. And so if you allow your students to have some freedom in addressing content in place or pace or path or time, how can that help students discover their own potholes as opposed to forcing you to uncover their potholes? So an example might be, and we'll just throw out, let's say, a pre-assessment, like a really short 5-question pre-assessment. In my Texas government class that I have, I give them a super short, really basic 5-question pre-assessment on stuff that they should know by the end of my course. And so I use that as a pre-test and a post-test. And not only am I pre-assessing, like, what do they currently know about Texas government, but then at the end of the semester, I give them the same one. And that also shows growth. Did they grow in their understanding of Texas government concepts? And so that's kind of a way for you to use in a pre-assessment. You can then start to discover the potholes before you actually run into them. Yeah, students can work in areas that they feel strongly in. I love that, especially for my kids. If one of my kids can't do a presentation, then let them do something else that's going to meet the same requirements. Allow them to redo or rewatch what they're struggling with. Absolutely, Shannon. Back in the day when I was in school, that was called cheating. If you had like 5 different chances to do something. And I thought it was unfair back then. I think it's unfair now. If the whole point is to show understanding of content, as long as the students are doing it in a legitimate fashion, why not let them go through some of those pre-assessments multiple times or assignments multiple times? Students are great at searching it up. Andrea says that students are great at searching it up. I agree. But then what do you do with that information once you search it up? And so that puts the onus on us. How do we put together a lesson where kids can Google data or information, and then we need to what are they going to do with that data or information? So we can still add a level of creativity on there. Allowing students flexibility gives an opportunity to work with what they have and how they can, says Mandy. Yeah, absolutely. And it would be a horrible, horrible day in this world. You know that old black and white cartoon that's, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree thing. If we're asking our students to do something in an inflexible way, is it that they don't know the content or they don't like the medium through which they have to express themselves? And so that's something we have to take into account as well.
I see a lot of y'all talking about voice and choice, and I saw several of y'all talking about pre-assessing, so those are all really important as well. And also I've seen several of y'all mention kind of moving at your own pace, being able to watch, rewatch videos of material that maybe they didn't get the first time or need to spend a little more time with it.
Mm-hmm. Especially when we're not there face to face with them. Yeah, Laura's talking about communication. I'm a huge believer, especially over communicate. Write your instructions on a Google Doc. Also put that into a video, put that into audio, like make it completely accessible to the student. All right, good. Yeah, so it looks like we understand the concept of, how does flexibility allow for students to discover their own gaps and potentially fill in their own gaps before we launch into a new unit or chapter.
So Charles and I, as we went on our blended learning journey, we kind of used that definition, which, by the way, comes from the Christensen Institute. And so we kind of discovered as we went out and visited classrooms that we felt like something was missing. Like they were doing everything right according to the definition, but we didn't really see that personalized learning aspect of it. For example, we would go into a classroom and maybe a teacher said, okay, everybody watch today's video and then do this worksheet and then turn it into the box and I'll be over here if you have any questions. And so technically that kind of fits the definition, but it wasn't really what we were wanting to see. It wasn't personalized learning. So we created this image and we added the word data in the middle. Because I think what's missing there, and I think it's implied, I'm not saying the Christensen Institute left it out, but I think what we need to be really intentional about is what some of y'all mentioned, doing that pre-assessment, finding out where those potholes are, like Charles talked about earlier, and then giving students different pathways in order to fill in those potholes for themselves. Because if we're trying to fill in one big pothole right here in the middle of the street, but there's little tiny potholes all over in other places on the street, we're never going to, those potholes are still going to be there if we're concentrating on that one middle pothole. So using that data and then making the goal to be personalized learning, a personalized learning experience so each student gets what they need to fill in their pothole. Anything else you want to add, Charles?
No, just that data really, it really ties into flexibility in place, space, path, and time. And if you think of a real umbrella, if you don't have that arm or stem, it's useless. Maybe you can wear it as a hat, but other than that, it's going to be useless in protecting you against the elements. So with the data, that if you're going to offer, for example, flexibility in pathways, you've got 2 or 3 different ways to do an assignment. How in the world are you, or how in the world are your students going to know which pathway to take unless you have data to support that choice?
And so it's not always about offering them, 20 choices just for the sake of 20 choices. They might have different choices, but maybe based on data, or it could be based on their best learning style, but based on something, not based on just willy-nilly. All right.
And real quick, Nifa had a great question. Any examples on ways to collect the data? Anything where the students can reply either openly, like open-ended questions, or multiple choice. You can do Google Forms. That's a given. Shelly and I love Mentimeter. Even Nearpod, the resource that we're using right now, you can embed questions in your slides as you go through. Anytime that you can collect data from the students that helps differentiate, who gets it and who doesn't get it, is, basically the vehicle for this is anything. My
even
daughter
conversations.
What's that?
Even conversations with students.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to say is my daughter was doing some assignments last night and she was writing on a piece of paper. I took a picture of it, sent it to her teacher, and her teacher already gave us some feedback. And that's data. If you want the quick data, Mentimeter, Padlet, Google Slides, Google Forms. What's another one that we've used before?
Quizzes.
Yeah,
if you have Canvas, you could give quick quizzes in Canvas as a pre-assessment. So we're going to have you do a little activity, and we have created, Charles is typing in, and some other people I can see. Y'all go ahead and add, if you've got other places to get data, go ahead and add those in the chat box, and Charles is adding some in.
Yeah, JJ mentioned qualitative versus quantitative, but I think in this case, qualitative is quantitative. If you're trying to get the mind of students, just on where are they, how comfortable are you, I think all of it becomes quantitative. Certainly not in a robotic fashion, but you do want to take in both the qualitative and quantitative, but it ends up being, if you can take action on it, it ends up being quantitative data.
And it could just be as easy, and I know right now, you know, exit ticket has to be one of these digital forms, but when we're in school, it could be a sticky note exit ticket when they're walking out the door to know where their gaps were from today, so that can guide instruction tomorrow. So it could just be anything as simple as that. Pear Deck, yeah. So Pear Deck is similar to Nearpod. It's tied to Google as well, Go Formative. So these cards right here, and we're going to let y'all play with them in just a second on the next screen, but we just wanted to show them to you first. Charles and I, he found this really cool image that had some little cards that were the idea of this, that kind of talked about different pathways that you could create. So as we thought through blended learning, we thought, you know, teachers at the beginning were asking us, can you just give me a lesson plan form to fill in for blended learning? And blended learning doesn't really work that way because it's personalized. So we came up with this idea of these individual cards, and when we're face-to-face, we have actual cards, but they're movable, and then you can use these arrows and you know, kind of put the arrows in between, showing like step to step as you're going through a lesson. So what we're going to do on this next slide, I'll pop it there for y'all. You can go to your Google Slides, click here and log in. It'll have you make a copy of those cards. And I guess I should have pulled up a copy to show y'all. Let me pop over and show y'all those cards too.
So the intention of the cards is it breaks down a lesson plan, if you will, into normal chunks. And what I mean by normal is just like, you know, we all have face-to-face, we all have large group, small group. We probably all have some sort of pre-assessment, post-assessment, even if it's just a conversation. And so the intention of these cards is that you can move it around on your Google slide so that if you have to, quote unquote, reinvent a face-to-face lesson and move it more in the direction of a blended learning lesson, the cards can, in a more concrete way, it can help you visualize what that's going to look like. And so if there is a gap, for example, in your lesson where it's like, oh my gosh, how do I go from large group to small group? The cards help you see what you need to do in order to go from point A to point B.
And my computer's being really slow. Apparently it's going to take like 20 minutes to get to the cards to show y'all. But we're getting close. There are those cards we showed you, and then we added another slide with some more cards they're black, and those are the pace, place, path, and time cards that you can stick in there. So this is what y'all should be seeing once you've opened that and made your own copy. So you can basically use these cards, copy them, you can print them, you can do whatever you want to kind of use them to plan out some lesson flows when you're doing blended learning. And the reason we stuck the black cards in there was because if you're not offering some form of pace, place, path, or time based on data, then you're really not doing personalized learning. So that's why we stuck those in as well.
Christine's asking a good question. Is there any advantage in Pear Deck versus Nearpod? I think they're very, very similar. My experience has been with Nearpod, and so I lean in that direction, but Pear Deck, I believe, saves to your Google Drive. So that might be a nice little advantage. I know Nearpod is an add-in, and that's how we're using it today. But I don't think that you can go wrong with either one of them.
I know, like Nearpod did a webinar for us last week, I guess. And so the people on our team that were at it, Charles and I were doing a different one at the same time, so we weren't in there. But they love Pear Deck because they were in there and they saw it. You know, I think if you see a presentation on either one, you're going to come out loving whichever one you see. So here's the little black cards, the pace, place, path, and time, and then the data cards in there. And if you scroll down to like slide 6 and 7, those are just examples of how teachers have used those cards to plan out lessons in face-to-face trainings.
Can you make those images bigger?
Yeah. It might take 20 minutes to make it bigger. Yeah, so there's some examples at one of our sessions.
Yeah, and so what we did in our sessions, we asked teachers to just kind of map out, I believe, an activity that we did face-to-face. And if you'll notice, they had different pathways for the same exact experience. And so this is where that personalized learning kind of kicks in. Your students are going to perceive your lesson, the lesson that you have in your head that's very linear, they're going to perceive it likely in a different way than you've planned it out. And so using these cards to help plan out your lesson and make it a little more blended, add in that flexibility because the kids are already seeing it probably different than the way you intended. If you can build that flexibility in, it allows them to go from being stuck in a one pathway lesson to having the option to choose multiple pathways.
And sorry, these are sort of upside downish, looking weird, but I don't know why. So I'm going to scoot on to the next slide, but y'all continue to play with those. You have your own copy. You can, use those as you want. You're welcome to share those as well. So we want you to take a look at like a traditional, if we did like a whole group instruction, then maybe the kids are doing some sort of an independent activity, and then maybe you give them a little assessment at the end. That might be a pretty typical traditional lesson. Not blended learning. It's, definitely it's not based on data. There's not flexibility. So we just want y'all to be thinking about now, how could you change something like this, thinking about those different cards to make that a blended learning lesson? So think about that for a minute. What might you add in there to make that blended learning? I'm going to let y'all look and think for just a second.
And keep in mind that you want that data is the important central piece. And then the flexibility in those 4, that place, pace, path, and time, that's what's going to make something, that's basically the definition, or at least Shelley and my definition of blended learning is flexibility in place, pace, path, or time, as long as it's driven by data.
Okay, so we're going to have you do a drawing activity. So how would you change that lesson? So thinking about what we told you on the last slide, how would you change that lesson? Just a basic traditional lesson. Use your drawing tools and your text tools, and you don't have to draw cards if you don't want to. You can use text and arrows, but how might you create a personalized learning experience for your students that can address their gaps?
Yeah, and don't be afraid to draw an analogy as opposed to like writing it out with the virtual crayons that you're using.
I did practice yesterday to make sure that we could do it.
So let's do this. I'm really liking Kirza. You submitted a drawing. Would you mind unmuting your mic and sharing with us?
Yes, that's just collaborating among the students. So that can be it can be just 2, or it can be like a small group. And that's something I saw on the cards, that blended learning, it's
right here,
the teacher part, but it also needs a collaboration part with other students as well.
Very good. And when you allow students to kind of break apart, what would you think as far as planning something like this? Like what instructions would you have to give your students so they could be more independent?
They would have to have, I'm thinking of cooperative learning, so roles. Each one of them has a role and something to share so that not only one is doing all the work.
Love it.
So it could be a checklist, it can be and as well as time. It needs to be timed. This needs to be done by this time, and so that they can be productive.
Yeah, very good. I'm just wondering what he's asking for, if it was candy or was it.
He's telling me, let's go out.
Right. I don't blame him.
He's done with quarantine. Every day he's like, Mom, what are we doing today?
In your reactions, give me a thumbs up if you're done with quarantine as well. I think that we're all on your son's side. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Shelly, stay at Brandon submitted something.
Okay.
Is that B right? Brandon, would you mind unmuting your mic and walking us through?
Oh, wow, sure. I don't even remember what I drew. Yeah, so I figured we'd start with some sort of pre-assessment activity, and then from there, using data, right, to guide students into maybe some sort of self-paced Nearpod, but having different levels of activities based on their pre-assessment, and then that could lead to different types of student output.
Very nice. And when you say different types of student output, are you talking about artifacts?
What do you mean by artifacts?
Oh, well, great question, Brandon Walters. Are you talking about like different, like maybe a video versus a poster versus a whatever?
Sure, yeah, as long as the outcome is basically the same, right? That they're, I teach French, so that would be like if they're speaking or they're writing, we want to assess those skills. So give them choices in different ways they can demonstrate their proficiency in writing or speaking, right?
Ooh la la, that's a great answer.
How about this one, Patty? I want to hear hers. Patty, can you turn on your microphone?
Patty.
Okay, so basically it's nothing more than just starting from that pretest, but trying to show visually how you can jump out after a pretest to all different areas. So on the teacher's side, she would have to be extremely organized to have all those areas there, and then ending hopefully by getting all of them spiraled up to the same location.
Love that.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's go ahead and move on.
Okay.
So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but again, why don't we do this? Let's talk about the types of data that you guys have access to. If you wouldn't mind answering the question, is this one where they just type in, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind just typing in a whole list of, in your current coronavirus 19 world, what are some ways to pull in data from your students right now? And these can be summative, formative, they can be conversational, they can be anything, qualitative, quantitative. Go ahead and just make a list of ways that you could get data from your student right now. So while you're typing that answer, back in the day when I taught high school government, I had a student who was really, really sharp who made a 20 on one of my amendment tests. And I knew that this was just off for him. So I took him out in the hallway. What's going on, man? What happened? Everything okay? He said he didn't have a chance to study. He was working late, yada, yada, yada. So I just barraged him with questions. I was like, which amendment is this? Which amendment is that? Choose 3 amendments and walk me through what they are and maybe throw in a court case or whatever. And he did all that verbally in the hallway. So I got rid of the 20 and I gave him, I think, an 80 or a 90 or something like that. Assessments don't have to be on paper. They can be verbal. And with that little bit of grace and love, as long as the students are showing off what they know, I don't think it matters how they show that off.
This one's a good point. Active participation in the course. If you're using Canvas or something like that, where you've got all that analytics and data, you can see if kids are in the course or not and how long they've been in there. Like when you give a quiz, you can see how long they spent on the quiz. So lots of data in there. If you see that they spent 3 minutes on a quiz, you might ask them, why'd you only spend 3 minutes on the quiz?
And Shelly are going to be doing Shelly and I are going to be doing a session next week on Canvas One of the things you can do in Canvas is you can see how often the teacher and the student interact. And so if you've got kids who are in Canvas who have low grades and the interaction level is low between the teacher and the student, that's great data just for yourself to figure out, hey, maybe part of the reason that their grade is low is because I'm not stepping in and supporting them like I am other students.
Okay, I'm going to go on, Charles, because we're running out of time, and then we can also do some questions real quick. And if y'all have to leave before we get to the link in just a minute, or actually maybe I should just put up the link. I know some of y'all have other meetings you've got to get to. This one should be the link, I believe. Can y'all click on that and grab the link to the presentation?
Yeah, so the gist of today's session is really think about your data. Data tends to be thought of as cold and hard. Think about your data as a way to add flexibility to not just how your students learn, but how they show what they know. And that starts moving you in that blended learning direction. Yeah, if you guys aren't using data, you may be doing tech integration at high levels, but it's not blended.
And tech integration is not bad, but it's not blended. At Mrs. Shaw GTT.
Underscore or just GTT?
GTT, no underscore.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, Shelly, Marcy's asking, actually a few people are asking about the cards. Why don't we get together after this video and put together a quick, like, here's how you would use the cards.
Okay.
And then we can share that link out on Twitter to hashtag Blended Learning Academy. And that's where you're going to find that.
And we'll post it on our page as well. So thank y'all so much for coming. We enjoyed being with y'all. If y'all have questions, feel free to stick around and post them in the chat box, or you can turn on your microphone and ask.